Okay, the female reproductive system. We're going to be looking at something that we already know. This is the urinary bladder here. And you can appreciate how the uterus is resting on top of the urinary bladder, the female reproductive system. The interior of the uterus is here then, and of course the exterior would be right here. This, incidentally, this sort of blind end of the uterus is referred to as the fundus. Now, if we go to the end of the uterus, we find something which we refer to as the cervix. We'll talk about the cervix a little bit more. But the cervix essentially provides a vehicle for essentially collecting sperm as it dips into the vaginal region. It also is responsible for plugging the entrance to the uterus. This region below the cervix is known as the fornix. This is where the sperm tend to collect. And of course, we're looking at the vagina here. Now, at the beginning of the vagina, we have the vestibule, and then we have the labia minora and the labia majora. The labia minora is the hairless lip of the female reproductive tract, whereas the labia majora, of course, contains pubic hair. Also in this region, this sort of little candy cane type thing is referred to as the clitoris. This is essentially the pleasure center of the female reproductive system. All right, well, let's go the other direction now. This is the fundus of the uterus, and you can see that there's a tube actually leaving the uterus on either side. I'll show you another model of that soon. This is the fallopian tube. Now, at the end of the fallopian tube are finger-like structures which we refer to as the fimbriae, and the fimbriae literally stroke the interstitial fluid that essentially the egg will be released into from the ovary, which is this structure here. The ovary and the fimbriae actually are not connected directly together, unlike what we see in the model here, but they are separate structures. But the ovary releases the egg, it's picked up by the fimbriae, and then the egg is going to travel into the fallopian tube here, where it can be potentially fertilized. There's a ligament right here called the round ligament that actually helps to support the uterus, and then here is a broad ligament, which we simply call the broad ligament, which for all intents and purposes is part of the parietal peritoneum, and that also supports the uterus. This represents a released egg, and you can see that the ovum is in the middle here. There's the nucleus. This nucleus is actually, if this were a released egg, is not in the right phase of meiosis, though. This almost looks like prophase. It does look like prophase. Nonetheless, it should be in metaphase 2, so this is a little bit of a misnomer. You can appreciate the zona pellucida around the egg, and then the cellular structure on the outside are the granulosa cells. The zona pellucida basically prevents fertilization by 2 or more sperm to the egg. Once the sperm essentially works its way through the granulosa cells and through the zona pellucida into the egg, fertilization takes place, and the zona pellucida becomes an impenetrable barrier so that more sperm cannot be entering the egg at the same time. The granulosa cells are like the nurse cells in effect for the egg. They also are cells that are responsible for converting estrogens, androgens into estrogens. But not so much surrounding the egg here. That would be more follicular granulosa cells.